The Conference of the Birds. One person from whom Maulana Rumi learned much was Farid Attar. Attar was a famous poet who lived long ago in Iran, in a town called Nishapur. Attar was the owner of a shop in Nishapur. He sold medicine and perfume to his customers. He may also have treated people for illnesses. At one time in his life, Attar is said to have traveled to Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and India. During his journey, he must have met many people and heard many tales and fables. After completing his travels, Attar returned to Nishapur once more. Here, he began to write poetry. One of his longer poems is called The Conference of the Birds. This is a story about a group of birds who set off on a long journey to find their king. They are guided on their way by Hoopoe, the wise bird. The journey takes the birds through 7 valleys before they can reach the king. In each valley, the birds come across various trials and adventures. In each valley, they learn something new about themselves. Attar wrote this poem to help people understand the journey that the human soul has to make before it can meet God. The story that follows is based on the Conference of the Birds. Let's join the birds as they begin the long search for their king.
What a sight it was! All the birds of the world were gathered together. They had gathered for a very special reason. They wanted to know who their king was. We must search for our king, they said. Our kingdom cannot exist without a king. However, none of the birds knew anything about their king, who he was, what he looked like, or where he lived. None of them knew except Hoopoe, the bird of wisdom. She was more than happy to tell them. The king we search for is called the Simurgh, said Hoopoe, raising her crest like a majestic crown. The Simurgh is no ordinary king. Before him hang 1,000 veils of light and darkness. There was a loud gasp from the birds. Once the Simurgh came out of the veils like a bright sun and made many colorful shadows on the earth, Hoopoe continued. As he looked upon these shadows, all the birds of the world came into being. We birds are the shadows of the Simurgh. The birds were eager to learn more about the Simurgh. Hoopoe told them about a time long ago when one of the Simurgh's feathers floated down to the earth in China. It was the most beautiful feather anyone had ever seen, said Hoopoe. Although our king is close to us, right now we're very far from him. We have to cross 7 long valleys to reach him, and it will take many years to cross each valley. Hoopoe warned the birds about the great dangers they would face on the journey. Each bird would have to be as brave as a lion to follow the long path through the 7 valleys. The birds were very excited. They were longing to meet their king, but slowly they began to fear the long and dangerous journey before them. One after another, they started to make excuses. Nightingale said he could not be parted for a single moment from his true love, the beautiful rose. It's for me that she flowers with her 100 petals, sang Nightingale. How can I wish for more? The rose is indeed beautiful, said Hoopoe, but her love is full of thorns. She blushes at you each spring and then smiles no more. Come with me, Nightingale, and I'll show you the rose that lasts forever. Duck waddled across to Hoopoe. I cannot live without water, she said. I find my food in the water, and I wash and pray there. If I have any troubles, I simply wash them away. Water can clean only your face and feathers, Hoopoe replied. You must also make sure your heart is pure. Come with me, duck, and the Simurgh will clean your heart as well. Partridge claimed she was in love with bright and shiny stones. They are the most valuable things one can have, she said. Stop digging for precious stones, advised Hoopoe. Without their colors, they are only pebbles. Come with me, Partridge, and I'll show you the most precious gem of all. Most of the birds were still not ready to make the perilous journey, but many others became determined to meet the Simurgh. They chose Hoopoe as their guide and promised to follow her all the way to the king's palace.
The Valley of the Quest. As the birds entered the Valley of the Quest, they saw a vast desert before them. The path through the desert seemed endless. The birds fell silent as they flew on. After some weeks, they spotted two travelers walking through the sand dunes. My patience has run out, said one traveler to the other. Tell me, when will we reach the end of this valley? His wise friend pointed to the flying birds above them. Imagine one of these birds has to move a mountain of grain, which is 100 times higher than the sky. He said, suppose the bird takes 1,000 years to move just one grain. How long would it take to move the whole mountain? It would take a very long time indeed, replied his fellow traveler. Then, said the wise man, that's how long you must be prepared to travel and search. The birds continued their journey. They spent many years flying through the valley. During this time, they learned something very important. If they wanted to see the Simurgh, they would have to give up all that seemed precious to them. In time, the birds were filled with a deep thirst. It was a thirst for the Simurgh. They longed to be with him. Nothing else mattered to them anymore. They began to fly faster and faster until they reached the second valley, the Valley of Love. What a fearful place this was. As the birds entered the Valley of Love, they saw a sea of small fires below them. Thick, black smoke spiraled upwards from many fires. Every now and then, mighty flames leaped towards the sky. Through the smoke, the birds saw two men walking on the ground. One was telling the other a story. The birds flew down to listen. One day, a rich merchant from Persia saw a beautiful straw seller. He fell madly in love with the young woman. He sold everything he had so that he could buy straw from her. Even when he was given food, he sold it to buy more straw. The first traveler asked the second to explain the meaning of the story. If you truly love someone, his friend replied, you will sell 100 worlds to be with that person. When the birds heard this tale, they knew they had to give up everything for the love of the Simurgh. Some of the birds found it difficult to love the Simurgh in the hot valley. Instead, they began to gaze at the magical fires around them. In the fires, they saw many things which attracted them. Some burned their wings as they flew too close to the flames. Others were not so lucky. But there were a few birds who began to love the Simurgh, despite the fires around them. At first, their love was like a tiny flame that flickered in their hearts. After many years, it grew into a blazing fire. The birds were ready for the next valley.
The Valley of Understanding. This was a valley without beginning or end, where it was dark all the time. The birds followed Hoopy closely, not wishing to lose their way. Hoopy seemed to see everything clearly, as though there were a bright light before her. After a long time, the birds arrived at a fortress where a soldier stood on guard. He was always awake and would not sleep, even for an hour. "Why don't you ever sleep?" the birds asked him. "I am searching for the knowledge which shows us the inner meaning of things," said the soldier. Duck looked confused. "If you stay awake and search, my gentle duck, you too will find this knowledge," explained Hoopy. The birds agreed to keep awake in the dark, but some of them fell asleep almost immediately. They were all very tired. In the still of the night, those who remained awake thought about the Simurgh. They spent many years trying to understand who the Simurgh was. These birds found the darkness slowly disappearing around them. Their hearts were filled with joy as they saw dawn breaking through the black sky. The dawn brought with it a very special light. It was a light which revealed many secrets to them. Duck, who had kept watch near an almond tree, gasped in amazement. "Look," she said, holding up an almond shell. "I can see right through the shell to the almond inside. Isn't it wonderful?" The others too were dazzled. In each atom, they saw the whole universe. The birds found that they could now cross this valley on their own. Each chose to cross it by a different route. The Conference of the Birds.
The Valley of Separation. Upon entering the new valley, the birds found themselves separated from one another and all alone. An icy wind blew through their feathers into their very souls. The wind blew so violently it destroyed everything in its path. Here, the 7 oceans were no more than a pool, and the 7 planets a mere spark. Here, an ant was stronger than 100 elephants. The birds flew on, feeling lonely and frightened. They searched hard within themselves for the courage to keep on flying. They often got lost, but they did not give up. They flew on, thinking only of the Simurgh. The Valley of Unity. In the next valley, the birds were overjoyed to find themselves together again. They danced and swirled around each other, singing at the top of their voices in the Valley of Unity. Here, everything that had been broken into pieces became one again. The birds had been separated like tiny drops of water above the ocean. Now they came together to rise as one mighty wave. On the shore, the birds noticed a wonderful palm tree made of wax. It was decorated with 100 colors. A woman came along and began to squeeze the tree. After some time, all the colors became one. The tree was no more. Only the wax remained. The birds looked at themselves. They too were made of 100 colors. If they looked within themselves, would they find something that was the same? The birds searched for a long time. At last, the answer came to them. When they looked deep inside one another, they no longer saw different birds with different shapes and colors. Instead, they found that they were one.
The Valley of Astonishment. Not many birds had made it this far. The few who remained did not know where they were. In the Valley of Astonishment, it was day and night at the same time. The birds found that they were in the middle of the valley, and yet as its ends. They could not tell whether they were sad or happy, dead or alive. While crossing the valley, the birds felt as if they were in a strange dream. They could not understand what they saw. Nothing like this had happened to them before. Never had there been a more astonishing mystery. While hearing nothing, they heard everything. While seeing nothing, they saw everything. What they saw, they would always remember. The Valley of Death. At last, after many years, the birds came to the seventh and final valley. Of all the valleys, this was the most astounding. Thousands of shadows disappeared in a single ray of sunlight. Thousands of waves melted into a vast ocean. The birds saw 3 moths dancing around a candle. The first moth looked on from afar, curious to know what the flame was. The second grew very hot as it came close. It still did not know everything about the flame. The third lost itself in the flame. It alone knew the flame's secret. The birds remained in the Valley of Death for a long time. They were the shadows becoming one with the light, the waves melting into the ocean, the moths dancing in the flame. Thousands of birds had set out on the great journey to find the Simurgh. Almost all of them had disappeared. Some had died of thirst, others were scorched by fire. Some were eaten by tigers, others had died of hunger.
Of the thousands, only 30 birds remained. Tired, confused, and frightened, they finally arrived at the palace of the Simurgh. The palace shone with thousands of suns, each one more brilliant than the other. Millions of moons and stars glittered on its walls. "O Simurgh, you who are brighter than the sun," cried Lupo, "please may we enter your palace?" The keeper of the Simurgh's court opened the gates. "What do you want here, you good-for-nothing flies?" he thundered. "Go away, the Simurgh does not want to see you." The birds were shocked. Was the Simurgh turning them away after they had traveled for so many years to see him? Did the Simurgh not feel the love that they had for him? How could he refuse to see them when all they wanted was to gaze at his face for a few moments? "O keeper of the court," they pleaded, "if you turn us away from the Simurgh, where will we go? We cannot fly anymore, for we have no wings left." On hearing these words, the keeper smiled. He had only been testing them. He began to draw back 1,000 veils, revealing light upon light. With each veil that was lifted, the birds entered a new world. As they passed through the veils, all they had done and everything they had been was washed away, until, finally, when the last veil was drawn aside, they saw the Simurgh. What was this? Were they looking into a mirror? Was this some kind of a trick? They could not understand it. "The Simurgh is none other than myself," exclaimed each bird. There they were, the 30 of them. And there was the sea, 30 Morg birds. They gazed upon their king, not knowing if they were still themselves or the sea Morg. The sea Morg finally spoke to them. You who are 30 birds did well to be so full of love for me, he said. This, along with the lessons of my valleys, brought you to me. Oh, 30 birds, I am truly none other than you, but I am more than you. Come and be one with me forever, said the sea Morg, stretching out his beautiful wings. And so they did. The 30 birds simply and happily lost themselves in the sea Morg forever.